The ocean, while it may be beautiful at times, has been said to have creatures lurking in it. And Job 41 agrees with this, as it talks about a creature which is so strong that nothing but God can defeat it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. In the Bible, there are many stories about the sea. There is the story of Jesus calming the waves. There is the story of Jonah and the whale. However, Job 41 talks of a different kind of story. It does not talk of joy or even of suffering, but then coming to grips with your problems. Instead, Job 41 talks of a creature which is so terrible that even God himself says not to fight it. In verses 8 and 9, it says, "Lay thine hand upon him, remember the battle, do no more. Behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him?" Going along with what Job 41 says about the Leviathan, I've made a short list of attributes. The first couple of verses, as you can probably see, are mocking the idea of trying to make peace with him. He is so fierce that you could never even dream of trying to tame this thing. It also talks quite a bit about how sharp his teeth are, the fact that he has airtight scales which are very hard to penetrate, and that he breathes fire. And it actually puts us in a very interesting way in verse 18 in Job 41 when it says, "By his neesings a light doth shine." Neesings is defined as sneezing. So when he sneezes, starts a small fire, which I thought was a pretty funny way of putting it, especially considering just the absolute destructiveness of this thing. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look individually at each of these passages to see what we can get out of them. So here we are in Psalm 74. We're going to be looking at verse 14. So it says, "Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces." Wait, did you catch it? Whenever it's talking about breaking the heads of Leviathan, heads might be a little bit big, but you know what it says. It says heads of Leviathan. So obviously he has multiple heads. It says, "And gave us him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness." Now this is obviously talking about whenever the children of Israel were wandering around the desert. Now I don't know if this is a literal event or if this is just kind of symbolism. David did use quite a bit of symbolism in the Psalms, but it could also be a real thing. Either way, it's a very interesting concept, and this gives us more information that we can put onto our list about the Leviathan in the sense that he has heads. We now know that. Now here we are in Psalms 104. We're going to be looking at verse 26. Now it says, "There go the ships, there is that Leviathan whom thou hast made to play therein." So when it talks about playing therein, we obviously know this is talking about the verse above when it says talking about the great wide sea. So we know that Leviathan inhabits the waters. He's not a land or a sky creature, he is a water creature. So I think it's interesting that it talks about playing. Now, I'm wondering if this is kind of, babying the Leviathan down a little bit, just to show how powerful God is compared to the creature. Even though it's a very powerful creature and it is very powerful compared to us, compared to God, nothing is anything. So I'm wondering if it's saying that compared to him, or if it's because it's definitely not playing to us humans. Obviously, in Job 41, it is saying, "Do not fight this thing. Remember the battle." This thing is not just messing around. It is clearly waging war with humans and other creatures. So obviously, it's not just playing. So it seems like this verse is kind of babying Leviathan down, just showing how powerful God is compared to Leviathan. Even though it is powerful, it's not as powerful as God. So here we are at the end of our journey. We're in Isaiah 27. And it says here in verse number 1, "In that day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea." Now this verse gives lots of information, but first off we need to figure out when is that day. And we know this right off the bat because in verse 13 it says, "And it shall come to pass in that day that the great trumpet shall be blown, and they shall come which were ready to perish in the land of Assyria and the outcasts in the land of Egypt. But the last praise, the most important, shall worship the Lord in the holy mount at Jerusalem." So we know this is either right before whenever Jesus is coming back, which is in most probability it is, or during the millennium. So that's the time setting. Now, many things in this verse. For one, the Lord has a sword, which is not really part of this study, but I think that's pretty interesting. Number 2, once again, reaffirming in the sea. We know this is a sea dragon. And then adding on to the phrase I just said, dragon. We know this is a dragon now, confirmed by this verse. So here we are back with the charts, but this is a little more in depth. So obviously we know this is some kind of dragon or sea serpent. I don't know. You take your pick. It's described as both. In its features, we have at least 2 heads. It says it has heads. We know it has very strong scales, and we know it has sharp teeth, as well as a pretty big size. In its weapons category, we know it has very sharp teeth. We know it breathes fire, and we know it's very strong. Its location, in Job 41:31, it says he boils the deep. So obviously he's in the deep for at least some time. And the deep is a very interesting phrase because it is used quite a few times in the Bible, and it's like it seems to be just a massive body of water deep underneath the ground, but I am not sure. And now for probably one of the biggest questions to do with the Leviathan. Is the Leviathan still alive? Well, back to that verse in Isaiah 27. It says, in that day, and as we were talking about, that is when the Lord comes back, which means the future. The Leviathan is still out there somewhere, roaming around.